Appendix A of the report, we've been withdrawn for number 8 and number 10. Thank you. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. So this is one of our regular reports to bring forward a number of assets to be declared surplus to City Council operational requirements, and this will start the process to bring them forward for further discussions regarding appropriate methods of disposal. So of the 8 assets we're discussing today, the most significant in terms of bricks and mortar is Sparkbrook Health and Community Centre, where we'll be seeking an assignment of the residue of our long leasehold. Elsewhere, there's a variety of land. Most probably notable is the former leisure gardens on Garwood Road. Most of the other land is incidental across the city. Ward members have been consulted and their comments are presented in Appendix D in the usual fashion.
Okay, Councillor McCarthy.
Just to thank officers for the detail we're now getting on the discussion with members. It's probably now more detailed than I was expecting, but I wouldn't want to contain your enthusiasm for reporting conversations as they've been had. Maybe it's something that as members we need to take away and encourage people to respond at the first request.
Thank you, Councillor Mack.
Yeah, first one, bit of navel gazing really. Land at the rear of 65-67 Four Oaks Common Road. I didn't mention. I know that. I didn't know we owned that. What actually has that been used for, if anything? Because I think the last time I saw that piece of land's got a boat on it or something, isn't it?
That is a former housing garage court. I don't know whether Anita's got to have any more intelligence on that one.
No, just to say that they are all demolished and derelict. It's just open land, really.
Okay, so brilliant. Obviously, I presume the boat will go before anyone does anything with that. But wonderful. And the other one was just the obviously land adjacent to 69 Hurstway, Erdington. I've been asked to make sure that if the committee could just make sure that, because that's just coming to grass, isn't it? Just whatever goes on there is not HMO exempt. I've been told to ask that, so I'm asking.
That is one of the sites we've deferred, but I'd also refer you to David's answer earlier about our standard approach regarding HMO exclusions in any of our disposals.
Councillor Harries.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yes, I'd just like to talk about item 1, which is Garwood Road allotments. I have given my views to officers in email, but they're not included here because I think the item was deferred and I was away with the Local Government Association when I was asked at the beginning of October. But in November, I have given views, but they're not recorded here, so if I might just say what my views are. This is in my ward of Yardley East, and I do have concerns about it from a ward point of view, but the more I've thought about it, it does make me think about other issues, particularly in terms of allotments more widely across the city. So the issue that I do have, and I am hoping to come away from this meeting either with a deferral or even for this to be withdrawn or for just further discussion if possible, is just because this area sits right next to the conservation area in Old Yardley, which is one of the oldest in the city. We were in the process, there's another piece of green space which is next to the allotments, which we're in the process of having included, i.e. the conservation area widened, when the appraisal and management plan was being done. I know conservation team is slightly denuded at the moment because I think they've lost one officer and one is on long-term sick, so we've been waiting for a couple of years for that management and appraisal plan to be completed, which I have to say I don't think have been done for decades, updated. So that is an issue about conservation areas that I'd like, is the bigger issue really. It has been closed, but as I understand, and locked as allotments for many years, and I did ask about it a year ago, but officers didn't know much detail about it, when it had been closed, why it had been closed, etc. And so there is some concern that there is some sort of rich biodiversity there, Of course, somebody will tell you there's a great crested newt or something, but there is some concern, and I have heard that because I've been in touch with both Yardley Conservation Society and also the Birmingham District Allotments Confederation. So I do have concern both in terms of the wildlife, where it sits on the conservation area, on the edge of that, and green space. And not far from there was quite a high-profile campaign with Barrows Lane over the last decade to protect playing fields and green space there. So the two wider points are how we are looking at bits of land like this that sit on the edge of conservation areas and what that heritage impact is, and also where is there an allotment strategy across the city? Because it's very difficult to say, oh, it's been closed for 20 years, nobody's using it, we'll get rid of it. But if it had been open, would it have been used? And I'm also informed that the way we look at demand for allotments, and I won't go on too much more, is we look at demand across the city and not in terms of specific demand in specific areas. So I'll leave it there, but if you could take that into consideration, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harries. If only we had the Parks lead in the room with us. Sorry, a bit of a hospital pass, Eddie. I don't know if there's anything you wish to comment on this. I mean, obviously, from the report, the perspective of this report, it has been declared as allotments. If there is, on reflection, a wider parks, green spaces agenda on this, I will defer to Eddie for any comments you may have at this point.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on the allotment strategy perspective. There currently isn't a live strategy for the city, and that's something that we're looking at over the next year or so to try and get a more strategic view of the provision and allocation of allotments. I think obviously, you know, the meanwhile purposes of that site, since it's stopped being an allotment, you know, it's now got a new purpose. It's probably very rich in biodiversity, and I think, you know, now that there's new statutory duties around biodiversity net gain, obviously any future development of that site will require the developer to actually pursue biodiversity assessments and provide some offsetting payments for biodiversity somewhere in the region, which may or may not make that site viable in terms of development, because obviously being 100% biodiverse with an abandoned allotment site could mean that the costs of offsetting that payment become quite extreme. So there's quite a few considerations to go through in terms of how we get to the final end result. But certainly at this moment in time, the conservation area complication as well, I think, is worth considering, I think.
Okay, we'll come back. Mo, David.
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's a couple of considerations with this site. Firstly, I think the report recommends, you know, that it's declared surplus to the current, if you like, allotment service use. Similar to sort of the paper that's going to be tabled in respect of the park lodges. So the intention would be that we can then explore all avenues in terms of alternative uses. You know, that may be a future sort of appropriation from one service to another. I think the other point that I would make is that, you know, part of the legal process that would kick in should this site be considered surplus to operational requirements would be that we need to explore the legislation that protects allotments to understand, you know, if there is the ability to transfer or dispose, and then similarly the treatment for any capital receipt that we might sort of obtain, because if it did come forward to development, as Eddie's alluded to, there might be some legislation around biodiversity net gain and what we might need to do to protect that that ecology, or indeed re-provide that ecology. But similarly, there might be some specific requirements around how we reinvest that capital receipt potentially into a future allotment strategy, as Eddie's alluded to, that the service are working on.
Okay, David, I'm going to bring in Councillor McCarthy just before I do, and then I'll bring in Councillor Pocock. The first thing that Councillor Harris said was that she'd made these comments when consulted, but they didn't appear on the paperwork, which means whilst this committee might have heard that for the first time, the service would not have heard that for the first time. And I don't quite feel like it doesn't come across like it was fully considered what she was saying in the first place in terms of her actual concerns that was raised at the time. So I'm just putting that out there, noting that, because I do think you know, we're hearing everybody talking about the biodiversity side, but it's not the first time Councillor Harris has said this to you, because she's given you that kind of feedback before. So this could have been looked into before coming to committee. Councillor McCarthy.
I fully appreciate that this is the declaration of sites as surplus and not the final decision on their future. And I wasn't having a go at Councillor Harries when I talked about people replying, and it's good to hear that she did actually reply, although it's not been picked up. But I do think, given the complexity of
just say, I was delayed in my response, in fairness to the officers, but I have done my reply in writing within the last few weeks. So, yeah, thank you.
But given the complexity of the situation there, and given that we're meeting again in a couple of weeks, I'd like to suggest that we take this one site out of the list for today.
So I would agree with removing that from the list for today and bringing it back in 2 weeks' time. We've better considered. Rob?
Yeah, just echoing the same point at 3.1, I think this paper still authorises their subsequent sale. I don't think we want to authorise that sale until we've given these other matters further consideration, so clearly we need to take that site out.
David?
Yeah, and Deputy Leader, probably something we can take offline, but I am keen to ensure we capture all ward member feedback. So where perhaps we haven't been able to do that in such a time that we can capture it in the papers that need to be uploaded, perhaps we do need, you know, some time within this meeting to sort of bring that to committee's attention.
Okay, and I think the last meeting that me and you've had about this around members' feedback and comments was that we're going to aim ahead of every full council meeting to have a drop-in session facilitated by the service, and that those wards where they might have things on the agenda, they can come in and actually give their comments as well, in addition to also requesting on emails. So that's giving members more opportunity, but more opportunities for me to say if they don't comment. So I think we shall be doing that. Councillor Harries.
Just quickly, thank you. I appreciate the decision of the committee, and as will Yardley Conservation Society and the residents. Because I do understand the Secretary of State has to be consulted in terms of a change of use for allotment, as well as the National Society of Allotments. And it is difficult to see how, without a strategy, even if it's an outline strategy, an outline plan, that we can declare, even if it's been closed for 20 years and locked, how we can just decide there's no value or use, or it can be declared surplus. But thank you for the decision. Appreciate it.
Brilliant, thank you. And going forward, I think we do need to consider that, because I remember when I had the allotments portfolio back in 2018, when I first came into Cabinet, that was very clear. You do need to get Secretary of State sign off for that. So to be talking about selling it without even any real thought into it and dialogue just feels a little bit premature. But I look forward to this coming back to the next committee. So in terms of the decision then, so with the withdrawal of the item we've just talked about, and also plot number 8 and 10, are we minded to go along with the recommendations as outlined in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.